Morning. It is Monday, 11 a.m. on the 27th of February. Welcome to another edition of our Mental Health Monday. It's great to be back live with you. I'm here with my good friend, owner of Pathways to Healing Counseling, and a great just public servant at heart, Kristen Boice. Good morning, Kristen.
Good morning, Mayor Jenson. I was so excited to be back today.
Yeah, it's great to be with you. We have a great topic here today. It's just, we're working through the winter a little bit here. I don't know where all you guys that are watching us from, but here in Noblesville, it was kind of a nice weekend. It's got some sunshine, which was mentally helpful, which you can talk about quickly, probably the benefits of sunshine, right?
Oh, they're so significant. Vitamin D helps with elevating our serotonin,
Yep,
our
exactly.
norepinephrine.
Get outside and breathe some fresh air. So hopefully we have some nicer days coming up here as we head into March later this week and get into a little bit, better time of year if you're more of a warm weather person like I am. So, but we are here today to talk about mental health. We have a great topic here today, Kristen. I was really excited about it. We're going to talk through some depression up front, but then we're also going to talk about self-sabotage. I know that is a pretty topical conversation right now as people are getting more and more into mental health and the discussion around it. I think they're realizing that maybe they may be some of the driver at times of the self-sabotage movement. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and how we break the cycle around it, which is incredibly valuable conversation. So as always, if you have any question as we go through this conversation this morning, feel free, if you're comfortable, to type that in the chat. If you want to just say hi, that's fine as well. And then I know a lot of folks watch this on recording throughout. So if it isn't live when you're watching, you can still submit a question and we're happy to run down an answer for you, either Kristen or myself, or we can help find us some resources there too. So, but we want this to be interactive and a great way to engage with the public. So, but before we start, we're going to do an exercise called square breathing that I personally love and promote and talk about all the time. And I'll let Kristen lead us through that exercise.
So let's do it together. We're going to do 2 breaths. And I invite you to do this on a regular basis every day. And what this does, it helps reset the nervous system, put you in more of a state of calm rather than anxiety or depression. So we know depression's in the past, anxiety is really rooted in the future. And so what this does is it takes us right here in this moment. So we start with our feet on the floor. We're going to inhale through our nose and slowly exhale out our mouth. And I like to do a count. Why do I like to do a count? Because on the inhale, you're getting a better, deeper breath. And on the exhale, we want to slow things down when you're breathing out through your mouth to regulate your nervous system. So as we put our feet on the floor, let's take a big, deep inhale through our nose. And I count and then release. So I like to count 1, 2, 3, 4 on the inhale. I like to hold for 4 and slowly exhale for 8. So if you want to do that in your head, you can, or if you just want to let your breath flow as it will, go with that. So feet on the floor, big deep inhale through your nose and release.
Now, Kristen, this breath, I was just thinking this morning, I did Orange Theory at 5 a.m. this morning. And at the end of it, we always do our hand on our heart, hand on our stomach, and do 4 counts in to signal to our body that we are done working out. And now we're into a recovery mode. It made me think about that this morning because it's the same thing that we utilize during anxious moments. And it's the square breathing. We're signaling to our body, correct, to take this out of the fight or flight mode into a relaxed, calm mode, correct?
That is correct. And that's another option. There's so many ways to do the breathing. So I like the hand over the heart. You can put your hand on your belly or on your core, and they want you to breathe. The belly kind of expands on the inhale and then contracts on the exhale, which is very different.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, it was mentally easy for me to realize, like, I just came from a hard workout and I'm telling my body, let's bring it down, let's recover. And that's very similar to a situation where we use square breathing more in a mental health capacity.
Exactly. And we're seeing more well-known resources using the breath. So like classes, exercise classes, the hospital settings, doctor's offices, we're seeing more acknowledgement on the benefit of doing deep breathing on a regular basis.
Yeah. So before we get into our topics for today, I wanted to kind of touch on the idea of anxiety, because you talked a lot about that with square breathing, how it's such a topical thing to do when you are feeling anxious. You know, we have been at our house a little bit lately, and I didn't run this by Julie Jenson, although I think she'll be okay with it. She's working on her master's right now. And during the month of end of February into March, doubling up on a class. So doing 2 classes right now. And so there's been a lot of anxiousness going on, just trying to work through that on top of being a teacher and a mom and a spouse of me and all the other things that everyone else has going on in life. You know, adding this in here, which we've been talking a lot about anxiety, and how I've been encouraged throughout the day of getting up and walking around, because anxiety lives in the body, and the importance of moving our body. I just think I've tried to utilize that conversation a lot with folks who are anxious. Get up and move a little bit. You want to touch on that real quick before we kind of go down this rabbit hole of depression and self-sabotage?
First of all, it's so relatable. Like, you're sharing the stress. It's stressful, and you're trying to manage kids and do class. The movement, what the benefit of the movement is, that's why walking, even like you said, getting up and walking, beautiful. It helps move the tension and tightness out of the body. And you're almost doing like bilateral stimulation. What does that mean? That means we're accessing the right and left hemispheres of the body. If you think about rocking, if you think about what I love is a butterfly hug to calm the nervous system when you feel anxious, and you can do this with kids, you kind of tap right, left, right, left. And when you're walking, you're moving and you're regulating the body as if you're kind of rocking it and using the right hemisphere, left hemisphere, and being able to take that bridge back and forth, instead of living in that amygdala, which says, panic, panic, I'm not going to get this done. I can't handle this. This is too overwhelming. We're slowing things down. We're moving that up and out of the body. And that allows us to shift our thinking. So when I'm looping, I'm not going to get this done. This is too overwhelming. I hate this. I'm so frustrated. We're moving the thinking from a looping thought to a more, hopefully we're shifting it into, I can handle it. That's why moving the body helps move the thinking. It helps move the feelings and shift those. It's like a gear shift. Think about a manual car, which a lot of people don't learn anymore. How to drive those. That's how I learned. We shift gears. That's what movement does. It helps us release and shift gears so we can access that prefrontal cortex that says, okay, I can handle this. I'm okay now. I want to give you another example of movement, but we're talking about moving the body, and we have to move the emotions. This is so key. I was just on a trip over the weekend and with a good friend, and her daughter was kind of getting iced out of a group, kind of getting ghosted out of a group. And we were at lunch and she's like, I'm so sorry. I've got to talk to my daughter. She's texting her. And I said, she's in college. And I said, that's totally fine. And what we did is the whole time I was like, kind of coaching her. I was like, now ask her how she's feeling. Ask her what she's afraid of. Okay, let's process what this experience is like for her. And she's like, she's having a panic feeling in her chest. And I said, okay, have her put her, we were just walking her through things to do. And by the end of it, she goes, okay, I'm going to go take a nap now. Like she goes, I feel a lot better now, because we're processing the thoughts, feelings, and body sensations. We're talking about it. When we shove it down, we cannot move it. And this is so important. And she goes, I get it. The processing is essential to working through the anxiety. I'm like, absolutely.
100%. And I think it's important too to say, while that sounds easy in theory, when you are in an anxious moment, or if you are flipped and triggered, I was using that term a lot this week because I was triggered about a few things. It is a lot easier said than done, right? I mean, we made it sound super easy, like, oh, just get up and walk around the room, you'll be fine. No,
100%, because you're feeling like I can't handle things, depending on the severity of your anxiety. So absolutely, this is not where I don't want to make it sound like, and you just do this and you're fine.
Right. Right. But I just think, again, I think it's important to kind of notice that if you can, movement is so key to this. So, all right, we're going to talk a little bit about the working through depression here today. Again, it's topical because it's a really rainy day here in Indiana, if you're around Indiana, but also just the winter time. We're coming through it. I can tell you where there's light at the end of the tunnel, but it is very much a time of year that triggers some seasonal depression. And then there's just overall depression in general. I think we're being much more open about that. I'm going to tell a story about that in a little bit too, that I thought about this weekend while watching some TV. But let's talk a little bit about what depression is, what it looks like, and how we work through the stages of it.
Yeah, so we can all experience depression at some point in time. And I don't want to confuse grief with depression. So sometimes what are normal responses to life events, you're extremely sad, you feel lonely, you feel hopeless, you feel despair. Sometimes that's circumstantial, given that you've lost somebody you love, or you've walked through a significant, let's say, car accident, or something's happened. And that is normal. Like, you're responding to normal life events in a very healthy way. You don't like it. You don't like how it feels. Now, if it starts to impede your functioning, so you start not being able to get up and brush your teeth, you're not getting dressed, you're not going to work, that would be a major depressive issue. So then we want to seek medical treatment. We want to talk to a doctor. We want to get into therapy. We want to take action. And that's hard when you're depressed. You don't feel motivated. You kind of have sometimes there can be a mild form of depression where you feel like you have the blahs, or you feel like you're in a funk, but it doesn't last. It might last a week. It might last a couple of days. It might even last an hour or so. Those are situational, and that you can move through that. We want to look at many different options for depression. One, are you talking to somebody? That is the key. Are you in a support group? Are you going to therapy? Do you have close friends, trusted people you can talk to about how you're feeling? Are you connecting to your emotions? Are you bearing things? Here's another one that people don't talk about, is just listen to a Harvard psychiatrist on a podcast. And one thing that he reiterated, which I have felt for so long that research is now showing, is if we don't work through some of the childhood trauma, which I'm a big fan of, family of origin work, or a trauma you've experienced, it's still living in your nervous system. It's still playing in your mind, even though it might not be conscious. And so that has to be dealt with. And the other thing, is there any part of you that you feel like is bad? Like, it's the shadow side. I don't know if you've seen Stutz, the documentary on Netflix with Jonah Hill. So Jonah Hill is a famous actor, and he's been in several movies. I didn't know much about him before I saw the documentary. It's called Stutz, Stutz. It's on Netflix, and it's with his therapist. And in the documentary, which I've talked about for years, about shadow sides. So sometimes depression is we feel like, if anybody knew this about me, they wouldn't like me anymore. If anybody knew that I got dysregulated with my kids, or I had an addiction issue, or I was, having an identity crisis, or anything that we have kind of hidden away because we have shame around it, we call that the shadow side. And the shadow side we can bury and split off from our parts of ourselves, because we feel like if somebody knew that about me, they would not accept me. I would not be worthy, likable, or lovable. And so a lot of times we have to look at the shadow side, and how much is that playing into your depression, that you're trying to put on this mask or this front, or you're fawning, which is fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. You're trying to people please your way out of it, and you don't have it to do. You're like exhausted. And so we have to look at all the parts of ourselves. We've, a lot of times in childhood, what we've done is we've split off from those shadow sides, because we think only the good parts are lovable. And that is part of working through depression in a major way. Then we can have, of course, chemically issues. Sometimes we need medication to bump up the serotonin. Maybe we need vitamin D. Maybe we need to get outside. Maybe we don't have human connection that we're lacking. And we're seeing through the pandemic, that was a huge result for teens, especially, the lack of, they're on their social media, but they don't have that in-person connection, which leads to feeling isolated, despair, and hopeless.
What, if somebody hears this or thinks about a little bit about their current state of mind and sees maybe some signs in themselves, what's kind of like the low hanging fruit of steps they could take? I mean, again, knowing that these are not easy steps to take. So again, we're going to throw this out here as like, yeah, just go talk to somebody or go find a therapist. I mean, those are very hard things to do, but where would you start?
So this is hard to say. This is how you start, because there won't be a one size fits all for everybody. So I want to just make sure I'm not.
Where could you start? Yeah.
Yeah. So a place to start would be naming it. Like, we have to recognize that I am sad. I'm not motivated. I'm not functioning at my highest level. I really am not even, maybe I'm missing work. I'm cutting class. I'm missing school. Those are your first sign. You have to be aware. So number one is awareness. Number two is sharing it with somebody that you trust, that's a safe person. Because once we bring it to the light, the shame starts to, if we keep it in a petri dish and don't tell anybody, it's going to grow. So telling somebody, sometimes we need to seek medical care. So it might be seeing your physician, it might be seeing a psychiatrist, or going to a therapist as a start. The next thing is, 30, if you journal for 30 days, and you're not going to feel like it. So let's just put that on the table.
Mm-hmm.
Journal for 30 days and walk for 5 minutes a day. Or get the lamp. We have the light that you can get, and you can sit in front of that. It's at your desk. It's like a little lamp. You sit in front of it for 5 minutes. It's scientifically proven to raise your vitamin D and your serotonin level. So you could get a lamp, a weighted blanket. That's helpful. But I really am into processing and movement rather than suppressing and repressing.
So if I don't want to name it, I don't want to talk to a medical professional, can I just get a lamp and a weighted blanket?
You can start with that. See if that makes a difference. Take some vitamin D. I mean, again, consult your physician. Start there and see if that makes a difference. If it doesn't, then you're going to need to go to the next level.
Yeah. And I mentioned that because I think there's not, we as a society want a quick fix, right? We want a pill, or we want a weighted blanket or a lamp to just solve all your problems. And there's probably much more to that, but I want to stop and ask a question about this, because this is something that I think people have experienced. Like if they're like, I'm okay. Maybe I need to see a therapist, but like the overwhelming anxiety of like, where do I even start? Do I Google a therapist in my community? Can you give us some guidance around that? Because I think even that step, could probably really be a barrier to a lot of people.
It is. First of all, I want to say there's low cost to no cost therapy available. So some people think, well, I can't afford it. And we do have low cost. So universities are a great place. So we have, like, Indiana Wesleyan University here locally has a graduate clinic, graduate counseling clinic. You can go to graduate counseling clinics for free or low cost. And so there are options out there. First of all, I would say go to psychologytoday.com. You type in, therapist, you put in your zip code, and you put your key issue. Like, let's say you're depressed or anxious, or you've got post-traumatic stress disorder, or you've got trauma or relationship issues, marital problems, or ADHD, or whatever it is. You put it in there and it will come up with recommendations. Then you look at the name of the therapist and their photo, you look at their credentials, or you can go to Google and just type the same thing in and it will come up. And then you look and see, oh, does that person feel like I could, just through their bio, do they feel like someone I would want to see? It takes courage. This is the most courageous thing you will do. I remember making my first therapy appointment. Did I tell you this story? Made my first therapy appointment, and it was through a referral. Like, I asked a friend and they told me who they go to the therapist, and she ends up doing a crossword puzzle during our therapy session. Do you remember this?
I do remember this now, yeah.
So if you go and it's not a good fit, and that was for me to do some deeper work, but if it's not a good fit, you can change. You can switch, and it's okay. So just know that you're not locked in. If you're like, yeah, I'm not feeling the connection, you can switch. 988 is not a substitute for therapy. It's a resource that I highly encourage people use. It's a number you can dial 988 or you can text. I am very big into this number because people don't know where to start. And sometimes it's that. And then they can plug you, they can walk you through, okay, I'll stay on the phone with you while you send the email to, schedule therapy, because people are afraid of being judged. They're afraid of being shamed. They're afraid to say, like, this person's not going to like them, or they're going to think they want to please the therapist sometimes. And when you go in and you go, okay, this person, I'm protected by HIPAA. They are not here to be my friend. They are here to help me heal and feel better about myself. It's courageous to make that first step.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to bring it up, because again, I just think it's so easy to say, but it is difficult, and I respect that in a lot of people. But there are so many ways out there to ease yourself into that conversation. So thanks for touching on that. So I wanted to switch and kind of talk a little bit about self-sabotage. I do think that is kind of a one that we haven't talked about as much on here. Can you talk a little bit about what self-sabotage is? Certainly can go hand in hand with depression. And how do we break that cycle? What does that cycle look like? Let's talk a little bit about self-sabotage.
And then I also wanted to hear about your movie.
Oh yeah. So actually I'll preface this. I wanted to encourage, I was watching the PGA Tour yesterday, the Honda Classic from Florida, and the guy who won, Chris Kirk, I believe is his name. You can look him up. He won last night, but he actually took a few years off, or took like 9 months off from the PGA Tour to deal with depression and alcoholism back in 2019. And it just kind of highlighted his success story. Openly admitted to that challenging, but openly admitted to being depressed and self-sabotaging with alcohol. And had to step away from the PGA Tour at a young age to be a better player. And here he came back and won yesterday, the tournament. I just thought it was a great story. And anyone who's willing to just stand up and be open, especially a professional athlete, to kind of show like, hey, this is where I was, this is what I was doing, and this is what I did to resurrect, to rectify it, and came back and won a PGA tournament. It teed right into, no pun intended, into self-sabotage and depression that we were talking about today.
Yeah, I think there's more of a movement of being open.
Yeah.
And that is like when we talk about self-sabotage, I'll tie it in here. So when we are closed off, so self-sabotage are things that we do to block, quote unquote, success or our own healing process. And so we all have them. So nobody gets out of this for free. They're patterns we've learned over long periods of time that, for example, someone will say, I'm going to exercise every single day. And then, right, they're like, I just don't feel like it. And then they beat themselves up over it rather than having self-compassion. But for him, like this example of this golfer being more transparent, open, and naming it, that's our first way to break the cycle of self-sabotage. So it's a nice tie-in. Like for him, until he was open and willing to admit he had an issue with alcohol and that he was depressed, we weren't going to change anything. So he would continue in self-sabotage behaviors because underneath self-sabotage is fear and a lot of pain. Mm-hmm. Fear of, even being successful, fear of something bad happening, fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of judgment. And so we just have automatic patterns that we've really developed over time. And so for him, he's breaking the self-sabotage by being open and transparent. And he decided, I'm going to own it. So ownership is the first step to breaking self-sabotage. Okay. So it ties in nicely to
it's perfect,
about, right? And now he's using that as a platform to help other people, which I love. So here's the other thing with self-sabotage. We get into this all or nothing, good or bad. Like if I can make a chart and it's like, these are the bad things, these are the good things. This is my shadow side of all the bad things, right? And this is how I feel good about myself through achievement and being perfect and people pleasing and success and, making people happy. And these are ways that I think are good. And these are the ways I think I'm bad. So I'm bad when I am angry, or I'm bad when I lose my cool. I'm bad if I scream at my kids, which we don't want to do, but sometimes we get dysregulated. I'm bad if I don't make everybody in the office happy. I'm bad if I don't get the promotion. And so that self-sabotage, then that creates shame. And then I want to numb that. I want to move away from that shame. So I might drink. I might get on social media and scroll for hours. I might, whatever that might look like for us to make that feeling of shame go away. So how do we break that is noticing when you're kind of moving away with your defenses and not tending to this feeling of I'm worthless, because I'm worthless will sabotage you. You'll go, forget it anyways. I'm never going to make it. And I'm going to just see, I ruined it anyways. I didn't hit my 30-day goal. So just forget it. And then now I'm out the door because I've just kind of done an all or nothing, rather than it can be an and both. Like I might have an off day and that's okay.
Well, I think we, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm obviously not by any means a professional at this, but even like the dieting scheme, you see that a lot of times where folks will be like, eating healthy, and I am super guilty of this. And like somebody brings donuts in, and I had one. Well, I've already had a donut. I might as well have 15 more. You know what I mean? Screw the day. We're done. It's the same type of. I imagine it's what you're speaking of.
Exactly what I'm speaking of. Because you're like, yeah, well, I already did it, so
done.
Who cares? I'm done for today. And then you feel like, oh, why did I do that? And I shouldn't have done that. Now I'm in shame over it.
Yep.
So it becomes an all or nothing kind of proposition. And that's where the invitation to say, maybe I'm setting up my expectations aren't real healthy. Like what's underneath that I have to go 30 days straight? And why am I having that rule for myself? First of all, we have to have more self-awareness about that. And then what if we break the cycle? I was just talking to my sister. I went to visit her and we were talking about this. I go, no, she's very like, I got my schedule and my, which is great. But what if you don't do it?
Yeah.
Then what?
Does that mean?
Can you tolerate that you might have a bad day? Or is it going to be, I didn't get my steps in. I didn't get my streak of my 100 and whatever day streak she's on. No, she's on like 5 years of like so many days, whatever. What happens if you don't miss it? Well, then it feels like, well, it's all done. Then all of that didn't matter. So that's an all or nothing approach rather than had a bad day. Okay, can I tolerate that I didn't hit the goal without going into self-sabotage and throwing everything out? This is the key. So how do we do that? We start building up a tolerance for watching the all or nothing thinking, the good or bad. And then we can tolerate it by nurturing ourselves through it. Like, okay, I ate a donut. I'm going to give myself grace. They brought it. It's okay. I had one donut. It doesn't mean I'm off the wagon. It's all right. Like that, we would want to talk to that part of ourselves like we would want a friend to talk to us or a healthy parent to talk to us.
Yep.
So like if your kid gets, this is really important for our kids. If they want straight A's and they get a C, or maybe they're not doing well and they're like, forget it, I'm never going to do well and I'm stupid. That's an all or nothing self-sabotage because of how we feel about ourselves. And you going, it's totally fine. Tell me about how you're feeling. You feel less than. Yeah. Now I'm processing it, but I'm acknowledging and offering grace rather than why did you get a C in that? See,
right. But I imagine you would say that it's important not to just brush it off and be like, oh, don't worry about it. It's fine. Correct. There's that balance there. Yeah.
There's a balance there. We process it and we offer grace. Like, how are you feeling? We do all that first because that's what we've learned. Process first. Then we can get into next steps after that. That's key. And that's key with self-sabotage. Are you not processing? What are you not facing? Otherwise you're unconscious and you're going to continue to just have the same patterns. So we have to face what's uncomfortable. We all like comfort. Let's be honest.
That's right. We do. We do.
I like comfort.
I'm with you there. So, hey, we're running low on time, but I want to circle back. We can maybe revisit self-sabotage this next time, unless there's anything that you want to put in there. Or was that a good intro to self-sabotage?
That's a great intro.
I think it get us thinking about that, and let's revisit it maybe in March as well, and kind of talk a little bit. We can lead off with some self-sabotage and maybe some tips and not tricks. I don't want to use that word, but to identify and how to move through that and what self-sabotage may look like. But that was a very good intro to that topic. So again, everybody, thank you, Kristen Boice. You're awesome as always. Thanks for joining us this morning. If somebody needs help right now, 988 I know is what you're going to tell me to tune into. You want to give a quick plug for 988?
Love the 988. You can use it anytime, anywhere, with friends, with family, or with yourself. Please know that you are worth it. You matter and you're important, even though your shame may tell you something different.
Absolutely. And yeah, please, thanks for tuning in today. Share with your friends and your neighbors, share on your social media platforms. Any and all are welcome to chime in and join us back next month when we do another edition of Mental Health Monday. But in the meantime, stay safe. And thanks again, Kristen.
Thank you.